Welcome back to Laser Cut and Fly RC Models. I'm the Laser Model Guy. What I want to do in this video is I want to go back to very basics and show how to produce components using nodes, using lines and using the trace function. So all the way back to the very basics, showing you every part step of the way so that we can make perfect components. Then we'll put our tabs in, I'll show you how we do that, and by doing that we'll get the very fine detail on how these components are made. Now the reason I'm going to do this is because I have been asked in recent videos about how the actual fine detail is done, and the reason I don't show that in every video is we did that way back in the first videos with the Hurricane and other aircraft, and we can't just keep repeating over and over the same things. But what I do want to do is produce a couple of short trainer videos so that anybody who jumps in any of these later series would be able to have a quick look at the trainer videos and then quickly get up to speed and understand exactly what we're doing. So that's what I'm going to do today. Let's get on with that. What I want to do now is I'm going to show you how to make components using the trace function and then lines and nodes, and I'm going to give a couple of examples of this so that you can understand why you might sometimes use one method and other times another. So if we open, I'm going to import the plan or part of the plan for the Hurricane, which we did in an early series. Now what you can see here is, I'll just move it off the workplace and we'll use this workspace to do our work. So what you can see is a lot of the components are quite nicely drawn out, and if we get really close in you can see that the lines are properly joined up, which sometimes they're not, and I'll show you that in a little while. So what we do with the trace function, if you right click on the image that you've got and then click trace image, and then for components on an aircraft these settings, the default settings, come up absolutely fine and they work perfectly for what we want to do. So we click OK. We've now got a trace of our image. So if I just grab hold of the center of our work area and pull it to one side, that there is the trace. So this here is the original, and we can now delete that, do away with it. So we'll bring the trace back over here. If I now right click on the trace and ungroup, and what that does is every part of our trace is now separate from anything that it isn't directly joined to with a line. Now if we zoom right in on this component here, what you can see now is we've got two lines. You've got an outer line and an inner line, and what that is we've traced the edges of the original drawn line. So the thickness of the pencil or pen line on the original plan is that thick, and we've now got a trace of the outside of that edge and the inside of that edge. Now to all intents and purposes, to create a component now, what we could do is we could just say, for example, grab this inner edge here, bring it across, and just for the look of it, I'm going to turn it round just for the image's sake. I'm going to turn it round and lay it that way. Now what we notice is that the original drawing, because it was done probably in ink back in the 60s or 70s, you find that there's little anomalies, like we've got this problem here, and we've got this bit in the slot that's cut out for the, you know, for one of the spars, because this is obviously a wing section. This is a section of the wing. If we come back here, you can see typical wing section at the rib. So that's one of the ribs that that forms the wing, which is shown here. So what we can do now with this, just to clean it up a little bit, is we could go to nodes, and then you'll find that everywhere where there's a little change in direction, there'll be another node. So all we would need to do with this is, in line with this line here, if we come up and we insert a node just by hovering over the line and pressing I, that inserts a node. And then what we could do is, if we delete all of these nodes here, this line would connect to that node. So I'll just show you what I mean. So we select those, and then by pressing D, they're deleted. Select those, delete those, and we now find that these are the last nodes we've got. So if we remove that one as well by pressing D, now all we have to do is turn this to align with this line here, and that will turn this edge to align. But when we try to do that, what we find is the other side moves as well, and that's because this is a smooth curve node. Because that was the most frequently found on this outline, that's what it's copied it as. So if we hover over that, click on it, and then press C, that will convert that into a corner node, and we can just then bring it down and make that into a sharp corner. So if we go back to the other small anomaly here, what we can do with this is just capture all of those nodes and press D, and it just takes them out, and we find that we've now got a nice straighter edge. Now, to all intents and purposes, if we were to now have that as our component, that would be it completed using the trace function. So we could cut that out and we could use that as a rib now. The only thing is, when you look at it, the detail isn't perfect. I mean, that's not a perfect square. Don't get me wrong, when you fit a 1/8 spar in there and you glue it, that will be fine. The glue will, you know, fill in these little spaces, and you won't have a problem with that. So that was the trace function for making a component. Okay, next what I'd like to do is I'd like to bring in a different plan. So I'm going to delete this hurricane plan, and I'm going to import the plan for the contester. We'll bring in page number 2, because that's the page that's got the wings on. I just know that, and you can see that there is, again, here we've got the shape of a typical rib. So we're going to do the same again. We're going to make a rib. So what we'll do to start with is we right click and we'll trace the image. Once we've got that traced, we can delete the original. And now what I'm going to do is, once again, I'm going to move that over to the side of our workspace. The workspace, by the way, is set up in Lightburn, and this is the workspace of my laser, the laser I use. So when anything's sat in this workspace, we'll be able to cut it out on the laser, because it's within the framework of my laser. So so what I would like to do now is look at this shape here. Now if I were to, first of all, we'll ungroup, just as we did, okay, now just as we did with the previous plan, we're going to ungroup these components. And now when we look at our typical rib here, because of the way it's been drawn, if we were to try to select that, if we select the outside, we don't have any of the spars cut in. So if I press Ctrl Z and go back, now with the inside line of the outer line, the inside of the outer line, it's got grain lines drawn in, and this is to show you which way on your balsa you want to lay this component out, with the grain running this way. And whilst that's fine for the hand-drawn plan from 1967, what it does do is it prevents us from pulling out the inner line with our shapes cut in, because if we grab the inner line at any point, what you'll find is all we'll bring out is that piece there. So I'll just press Ctrl Z and send that back to where it was. Now what we could do is, you could, while it's still in place, go to nodes, and you could then start manipulating these nodes and drag them, and maybe delete that one. So we're sort of dragging these now to where our shape is, and then if we do that, then if we were to do that for all the cuttings or all the shapes on this component, you could then take that component out and it would have those slots cut in. So that's how we could use the trace function along with the node function on our basic shapes on a drawing that isn't really clear enough for us to take the inner line or the inner trace of the outer line, of the drawn line. So that's how we could do it. So we'll just Ctrl Z, go back to where we were. The other way to do this, and the way that I personally prefer to do it, is I would use the line function coupled with nodes. And the way I would do that is I would start off by drawing a line. Now I'm going to select this, you've just seen me select 0, 2 as our layer, and what that means is that our line will be a different colour. It'll be the colour of that layer, and just to help us to see it really. So having done that, if I start my line here, and all I want to do is just click on that outer line periodically, and then get to there, and then drop down. This part at the back here is the trailing edge, and our rib actually finishes at that trailing edge. So I'll just come along and I'll keep clicking until I come to here, and then I'll just make that shape, and then back to that outside line again. Keep doing this until I reach this point, and then I'll come in, and then when I come up here, if I zoom right in, and I get this right over that original mark, you can see how the cursor changes shape. When I click on it, that finishes our line. Now we can see that we're not properly following our outline. We've got a very sharp corners on all of our you know, on our shape. I'll just show you how that looks. So you can see these sharp corners. So I'll just press Ctrl Z and get us back where we were. Now what we do about that is if we go to nodes, and now on each of these nodes, if I select that node, and then I'll change that now to a smooth curve node, and I do that by pressing S. That is now, that node will now produce a smooth curve. So if I close in a little and I grab the tag off this corner node here, I can bring that out slightly and then bring this one up slightly, and by doing that we can slowly get closer to the line, and now you can see we're almost following the line now. There you go, and you can keep tweaking that until you get onto the line, and then come all the way around the shape and convert them all to smooth curve nodes just by clicking on it and pressing S, and you can see how we're following this line now. Click on it, press S, and then underneath, same again. There you go, we just snap that in to make it follow that line perfectly. There we go. Don't turn these into smooth curve nodes, they need to remain as corner nodes. Okay, let's just alter this one a little to bring it more in line. Okay, and so what we've done there is we've created a shape using our line function and our nodes, and when we bring that up you'll see that that is now a good shape. So I'll just bring that across to our workspace, and we'll do a little bit more work on that. Now the spar is 5/16 by 1/8, which is 8mm by 3.2mm. So if we come across here, what we can do next is we can use our square function here, the shape function here, and we can make a shape, and then we can make the size of that 3.2mm wide by just coming up here, typing in 3.2, and that's now become 3.2mm wide. And then if we come to this one, we can make it 8mm high just by putting in 8, and now we know that is exactly the size that the spar will be that this rib is going to sit on. So what we can do is we bring that up. Now what I want to do is I want to line these bottom corners here with these two corners there, and make sure it's dead in the middle, so that if it's a bit smaller, that we've got an equal space either side. Now the way to do that is to get it close, and then if you press Ctrl and Shift key and then use the arrow keys, we can move this 1/10 of a millimeter at a time. And I would say that is probably where we want to be. So the bottom here is in the center and it is level with that bottom edge. So now if we go back to nodes, and we can bring this node here right to the corner, and when you get close you'll find it snaps into place. It's trying to get to that corner. There you go. And then we do the same with this, and then we do the same with this. And we now know that that spar, or that rib, will sit perfectly on that spar. So we just bring our little spar out. Okay, now the leading edge is 3/16, which is going to be 4.8 millimeters, and it's a square section. So in order to make that, what we want to do is create another one of these shapes, and we want to set the size of that shape to 4.8 wide, and then 4.8 and then if we ever want to level something up, make sure that it's flat and horizontal or vertical, all we have to do is go to nodes and then hover over an edge and press A, and that will make sure that that is absolutely upright. The other thing it will do is, if we are close to 45 degrees and we go to nodes and hover over, what will happen now is it'll go to exactly 45 degrees. So we now know that that is exactly upright through this center here and horizontal through that center there. So we know it's at exactly the right angle for us to cut in our leading edge. So if we bring that down, now what we want to do now is, where this line follows down, we want that line to correspond with this corner, and where this line would follow up, we want it to correspond with this corner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control and Shift, and I'm going to use our arrow keys to move this into position, and I think that is where we want to be. Okay, so that would be our leading edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to nodes, and I'm going to bring those to that shape, just like that. So what I know now is that when I put my leading edge on, that piece of 4.8 by 4.8 balsa is going to fit in there perfectly. So the last thing to do is, this trailing edge is going to be 1/8 balsa, and it's going to be, so it'll be 3.2 millimeters by 12.5 millimeters. So what I'll do is I make a shape like that, and this time I want it to be 3.2 high, 3.2 millimeters high, and I want it to be 12.5 millimeters wide. And then if I bring that down, and all I want to do with that is I want to get this edge, or this corner, lined up with this bottom corner here. And I'll Control Shift and then use my directional arrow keys to do that. That is now in the perfect position. So I've got two options. I can either bring this down until it's level with the top of our trailing edge, in which case it'll be a straightforward glue butt joint. But what I would prefer to do is, if we go to nodes and then we insert a node here right on that corner, and then if I insert another node here, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this node out until it is level, first of all lying flat on this top surface, but also I'm going to do it so that this line here looks sensible. So this line here is in a straight line, so that it looks, you know, like a sensible shape. And then what we'll find then is that when we come back to our proper shape, we've now got a small step at the back end, which our laser will be more than capable of cutting, and when we put our trailing edge down, our ribs will sit perfectly on that trailing edge, all at exactly the same height, and it'll be a perfect, you know, a perfect shape. So with that in mind, these are our two ribs that we've made. One we've done using the trace function, and one we've done using the line function along with nodes, and then we've used shapes to make sure that we get our correct sizes for all of our notches. So the last thing you would do with this is convert it to our cutting layer, and I would be using 00 as my cutting layer. You might want to then label that up, so you would click on your text button, change the height of your text up here. I would say probably 4mm, and then this would be our W2, or W1, we'll call it W1 now, and this up here would be the W1 for the hurricane. So if we come off that, we then turn that into our engraving layer, and then do the same for that, so that when we set up our laser, we won't be cutting through that area, we'll just be engraving, we'll be printing. And then the last thing to do would be to put our tabs in. Now this is the tab function here, and if I click on that, what I can do now is hover over my wing rib, and then probably about the center on the top and about the center on the bottom, I'll put in a tab. I'll do the same with this one as well, and I'll show you what that looks like in a minute, or I'll show you what that does. I'll explain that to you in a minute. There we go. So that's our tabs put in. Now when you come to use this tab function, it might not be visible, it might not be there in this toolbar, and if it's not, then you need to go into settings and switch off beginner mode. So if you just have a look at our tab function there, if I turn beginner mode on and then press OK, when we look, our tab function has now gone. So if you haven't got that tab function, just go into beginner mode, just go into settings, select beginner mode and turn it off, and then when you press OK, you'll find that you've got the tab function there. Now what the tab function does is, we can't see that now on here, but if we go to preview and then we scroll in, you'll find that where we put our tab, there is a 0.5 millimeter gap in the line, and if you look at the bottom, it's there as well where we put one. And then if we go to the hurricane wingtip, you can see there's one at the top and one at the bottom there. And what that means is that when your laser cuts these components out, there'll be a tiny gap in the cut, which means that the components won't fall out of your balsa sheet. So that's it. Really, that's all I wanted to do today, was cover off the basics for how we can make components, and those basics work for every shape. Now bear in mind that on some plans you'll find that the trace function doesn't work properly, and so then you would need to use the line and the node function, which to be honest is my preferred mode anyway, because when you look closely at the you know, at the trace at the traced outline, you'll see that there are small anomalies, and it's perhaps not as smooth as you'd want it to be, whereas you don't get those with, however close you zoom in, we've got this perfect line when we've created it ourselves using line and nodes. So thanks for watching. This video was produced in response to a request for this level of detail. So if there's anything else that you want to see, just let me know, and I'll try and put something together. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any content, and I'll see you all next time.